Well, our friend, the ever-quotable Greg Gutfeld, hit this one right on the nose. He sent out a tweet that included the following sentence. Our media is irredeemably evil, and every time I see evidence of it, it's like I'm discovering it for the first time. Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Whittle here with Steve Green and Scott Ott, and back to a subject which we cover all the time, but needs to be covered because these milestones need to be marked down. What was Greg talking about? Well, he was referring to a story from ABC News, and here's the tweet that ABC News tweeted out. A young protester has died from injuries she suffered when a luxury car plowed into her and another woman during a Black Lives Matter protest Saturday on a Seattle freeway that had been shut down for days due to civil unrest, police said. Well, what conclusions would you draw from that, Scott? A luxury car plowed into a group of Black Lives Matter protesters, killed somebody and injured another. Sounds like another example of a white supremacist just having lost their minds and just torn into the crowd of these peaceful protesters. Only the problem is that the driver of the car was black. We're not entirely sure if he was intoxicated, but he was simply on a freeway where he expected to be able to drive on a freeway. Imagine. And there were protesters in the way. Imagine. Yeah. So the question isn't about what happened. The question is about how far do you have to reach to come up with a headline that avoids the actual truth of the story in order to sell the truth that they want to sell. A luxury car plowed into protesters.
Well, first of all, I think that there should be a nationwide outcry for luxury car control. I think that, these things have gotten out of hand and we need to rein them in. This reminds
the NLCA will fight you every step of the way.
That's right.
Luxury car violence. It's a plague.
Rush Limbaugh had a long-running series of things that SUVs had done to people. And the fact that they were in the headline, it was always, SUV plows into so-and-so or whatever, as if there was no driver of the vehicle. And I'm trying to remember exactly how my grandfather used to say it. But he basically said that the most dangerous part of a car is the nut that holds the wheel. And I think that, and that was to get his teenage boys to pay attention more when they were driving. It's laziness. It's laziness from journalists. Now, and I know what you think it is, but frankly, it's laziness to tell the truth. It's unwillingness to come right out and say what actually happened. And so the easy way out is to say, well, what was interesting about this story? Well, by golly, that was a Cadillac or whatever kind of luxury car, diamond encrusted automobile it was, when they could have just said what actually happened and why. And so they want to lead with this expectation that, well, if a luxury car rammed into a crowd, then it must have been intentional. Who drives luxury cars? Well, it certainly probably wasn't one of these poor protesters who are out there just crying out for racial equality. It had to be somebody who has no care in the world for their rights. And so all of that headline is a terrible headline, not because it's manipulative, but because it doesn't say what actually happened. You could read that headline and still not understand what happened on the street that day. As you pointed out, very well could be that somebody was driving intoxicated. Could be that somebody was driving along on a road and by golly, there were people on the road where there are usually just cars. It's infuriating, but I don't look at these things and go, well, there's a movement afoot and every single last journalist in the country is corrupt, is a Democrat, is progressive, and is a liar and is evil. I think we ought to judge people as individuals and say, why did this reporter and this editor allow that headline to get through? What was their motivation, rather than just saying, okay, well, let's just use this as another opportunity to tar the entire media, which, often deserves tarring.
Steve, I don't know if I disagree with Scott, but I disagree with him on this one. In fact, I wholeheartedly disagree with him on this one. I think the headline is not only not lazy, I think the headline is a result of some serious hard work. Yeah. I think it's serious hard work for the people who wanted to report on somebody driving into a group of Black Lives Matter protesters, finding a way to insinuate that this person was white when in point of fact, they knew from the beginning that the person was black. And if the person was black, there goes the the narrative, and there goes the entire point of amping up the rage and the hate and so on. I think this is an extremely the result of a great deal of hard work and a great deal of crafting in order to put the maximum spin on the facts without outright lying, but nevertheless lying through their teeth.
Yeah, Bill, your question could have been my answer on this one. This is an active effort. It takes a particularly energetic maliciousness to come up with a headline like that for that story. It's not laziness, it's not stupidity, it is energetic maliciousness, and in an effort to drive a narrative. One of the most egregious examples of this was back during the Tea Party movement when they finally found a scary guy at a Tea Party rally carrying an AK-47. Actually, I think it was an AR-15.
Close up on the it was an AR-15.
And they left out the part where he's a black man.
Funny how that works.
Engaging at a Tea Party rally because he believed in it, and he also believed in open carry, so he's got an AR-15, and they crop it so that you can't tell that it's a black Tea Party supporter and also open carry proponent. So these examples abound. It's not an accident. It's not laziness. If it's 98% of our journalists are liberals or progressives. I don't like the fact that they hijacked the word liberal. It's a good word, and they are not at all liberal. That aside, there is ongoing reports of a civil war going on in our country's newsrooms, and it falls. There's an age barrier. It's about 40 years old, so millennials and under are engaging in a civil war against their own newspapers. The older crowd are. Sure, they're Democrats. Sure, they're leftists, but they at least believed in getting the story right. They might be biased. Sure, we're all biased. I miss the days when the press was merely biased. Yeah. But these young Turks taking over the newsroom are hardcore. Well, they're Marxists, essentially. There's no better word for them. They're the ones pushing the agenda that's energizing the Jacobins that are taking over our cities. This is the furthest thing from laziness. And as Ace of Spades remarked years ago, this has got to be about a decade ago now, he said, we could survive a biased media. I don't know how we survive a nakedly partisan media. And it's not just Democrats versus Republicans anymore. This is Marxists versus everybody else.
Well, this is what Marxists do. This is American Pravda. We would look at the Soviet Union and say, how could people believe these ridiculous lies that are just so obviously just blatant propaganda? Well, now we know. Now we know. We see it here all the time. I'd like to just make a point here that I think needs to be made. It's not that this is bias against conservatives. It is certainly that, but this is much bigger than this. This is not opposition to conservatism. This is opposition to the idea of democracy. It's opposition to the idea of self-governance by specifically keeping information from the public in order for them to come to the correct conclusion. These dopes and lunatics in the news media are basically saying that the regular people cannot come to the right decisions if we give them the actual information. Therefore, we've got to feed them just those parts of the information that will allow them to come to the right conclusion, which is the way we think about things. It's anti-democratic, it's anti-American, it's anti-people, it's wicked, it's evil is what it is. When you know something to be true and you go to great lengths to set the entire opposite perspective on that, you're not just lying. You're destroying not only the foundation of democracy, but the foundation of trust. Forget about the fact it comes from ABC News. You're simply participating in this fight against reality. Steve did a show this week about 2 + 2 = 4. No, it doesn't. Well, when the stories like this come out, it's the way of the news saying, no, 2 + 2 = what we say it equals. There is no external truth. And if we want to go down that road, we know where it leads. I agree with Greg Gutfeld. I'm going to read that sentence again because I think it is absolutely crystallized exactly how I feel about this now. Our media is irredeemably evil, and every time I see evidence of it, it's like I'm discovering it for the first time. We'll be back with more stories like this. You can rest assured. Steve was talking about peak stupidity maybe having been reached in 2020. I said it hasn't been reached in July. I wouldn't be surprised if it hasn't been reached for this week. But these kind of things aren't just stupid. They're evil, they're anti-human, and they're elitist. And if we can't stop them, at the very least, we can hold them up and wave them around to destroy whatever shreds of credibility these elitist, narcissistic snobs and idiots have planned for us. So there. This message is brought to you by the paying members at BillWhittle.com who keep this entire show going, keep the lights on here. If you've been watching the show for a long time and you get a lot of views out of it, that product is being paid for by somebody else. And if you want to help pay your fair share and push this message out wider, we would love to have you. You can go over to BillWhittle.com and click on the big green button and don't make me come out there. For Steve and Scott, I'm Bill Whittle. Thanks very much for joining us. We'll see you next week on Right Angle.